In relative isolation, Stan Gooch studied the elements of human evolution and the human psyche, and he came to an astonishing conclusion.
We are a hybrid species. We are a crossbreed between two very different types of early man, Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon.
Gooch authored many books including Total Man, Personality and Evolution, The Neanderthal Question, Guardians of the Ancient Wisdom, and A Double Helix of the Mind. However, Gooch never gained the popular audience, critical acclaim, or monetary remuneration that he had hoped for. Gooch was convinced that the Neanderthals had been underestimated.
For Stan Gooch, Neanderthals were their own species. They had their own culture. They had their own civilization even. He used terms like cities of dreams, that they built cities of dreams. They had a dream culture. They had an advanced, sophisticated culture.
Gooch believed that the ancient moon worship was possessed by the Neanderthals.
Neanderthal was, in fact, nocturnal, or at least semi-nocturnal, and worshipped the moon, whereas Cro-Magnon was a daylight creature, a hunter and whatever, and worshipped the sun.
The Neanderthals lived in Europe during the Ice Age for at least 100,000 years. Neanderthals' range included all of Europe and parts of Asia, the Middle East, and the Levant. During the time of the Neanderthals, in the Carpathian Mountains, there was a high population of cave bears, one of the biggest populations in Europe. There is still a puzzling mystery why Neanderthals went extinct, but a number of possible scenarios had been proposed by scientists, ranging from natural disasters, massive earthquakes, and catastrophic volcanic eruptions in Europe, but also human diseases. It is unclear if the Cro-Magnon massively eliminated Neanderthal on purpose, or if they were already doomed. Contrary to popular belief, many Neanderthal populations in Europe had light skin, green eyes, and red hair.
Typically, people had the concept of Neanderthals as being dark, brutish, ape-like, if you would, and the Cro-Magnons, our ancestors, were the light-skinned, fair-haired individuals, maybe totally opposite, that in fact the early archaic Homo sapiens were much darker than the Neanderthals that they came in contact with in Europe. Gooch predicted this long ago.
Neanderthals were much stronger than modern humans. The body type of a Neanderthal can easily be compared to that of a modern wrestler or bodybuilder. They were not delicate, nor what we would consider beautiful, but surprisingly, Neanderthals were highly emotional and a very sensitive bunch. There is strong evidence from their anatomy suggesting they had a very well-developed vocal apparatus, powerful voices, perfect pitch, and a more sensitive inner ear than the one of the modern human. Steve Mithun, an archaeologist from the UK, thinks Neanderthals were the most musically developed human species that ever lived. They were musically inclined, amazing singers, and they were great performers. The Neanderthals were a nocturnal species, and they worshipped the moon. They came out at night and performed ceremonies for the moon goddess, especially at full moon or new moon. Anatomical evidence for nocturnal lifestyle rests on the Neanderthals' very large round eye sockets and very large ear apertures. Large eyes, in particular, are the special hallmark of a nocturnal creature. The Neanderthals learned how to not fear the darkness, and in the process, they fell in love with the night sky. The Neanderthals worshipped the northern sky They considered that the still center of the heavens was in the north. They worshipped the northern constellations, the constellation of the Little Bear and the Big Bear. According to Stan Gooch, the cave bear ritual of the Neanderthals is the oldest ritual in the world performed by a human species.
That Neanderthal may have been far more intelligent than we recognize. Neanderthal man appeared to know far more about the stars, for example, than one would suppose. I mean, our general picture of Neanderthal is obviously of a shambling ape. And Stan argued that in fact he knew an enormous amount about the heavens and also about precession of the equinoxes and about all kinds of other things.
Symbolic behavior was central to the Neanderthal culture. Neanderthals may advance stone tools, cooked their meals, and ate vegetables. They wore jewelry and body painting, had their own language system, and lived in complex social groups. They collected and preserved crystals and minerals, and probably made figurines. In Stan Good's view, Neanderthals were culturally advanced people, highly civilized in spirit, with a deep sense of religion and practiced herbal medicine. The Neanderthal society was fully ruled by women. They were the ultimate authority. The night and moon ceremonies of Neanderthal were presided over by priestesses.
We've got the sun, the positive, and the moon, the negative, whatever you want to call them. It's incredible, really. And that's why the moon and sun fascinate us so much, because they reflect, as it were, literally, our own duality.
The Neanderthal society was peaceful, compassionate, and loving to one another. Central to their life was religion and magical practices. Neanderthals were what we would call today magicians, also shamans, and also wizards. Cro-Magnon's life was rooted in the concept of male ownership. This was a society fully ruled by men. It was a society who worshipped the sun and lived for daylight.
About hunting and producing weapons, things like that, Cro-Magnon was certainly superior. But if you're talking about knowledge of herbs, then I would say Neanderthal was superior. It depends what you're talking about.
He was interested in things like brain structure. He pointed out rightfully that Neanderthals on average had larger brains than modern humans, but these larger brains were differently arranged, differently proportioned than our modern humans. So for instance, a very important point of Gooch, one that he makes over and over in his writings and books, is that Neanderthal brains had larger cerebellums. The brain of humans, be it Neanderthal or modern humans, is composed of a cerebrum and a cerebellum. The cerebellum is sometimes referred to as a smaller brain. The lesser brain is essentially, one could argue, a separate brain housed inside and underneath anatomically the rest of the brain. Gooch points out that the cerebellum was larger in Neanderthals. He attributes, and I believe perhaps rightfully so based on clinical evidence, that the cerebellum is really the seat of many mental abilities, many mental processes that we to this day have a very poor understanding of. So for instance, dreams may originate primarily in the cerebellum. Certain types of artistic impulses, religious impulses, impulses of the sacred, certain, we could call it loosely philosophical and psychical impulses.
My view is that Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon crossbred in Central Europe some 30, 35,000, 40,000 years ago.
When Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon interbred, Stan Gooch believes each side made a unique contribution. At one level, this was a cultural cross-fertilization, but at a deeper level, it was a genetic encounter. Neanderthal contributed our religious genes, while Cro-Magnon contributed our scientific endowment. A project to sequence the Neanderthal genome took off in 2006 with the participation of the Planck Institute in Zurich, Switzerland, and the Broad Institute of Harvard and MIT in Boston. In May 2010, the Genome Project revealed shocking results. Interbreeding between Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon took place, resulting from 1 to 4% of the current European and Asian populations having Neanderthal genes.
You have these two cultures meeting, very different worldviews, essentially a duality. The scientific on the one hand, the religious on the other hand. I can imagine the Cro-Magnons studying the Neanderthals, perhaps surreptitiously at first, trying to understand, well, what are these weird people doing? What is all this about? What are these strange rituals and practices, these ceremonies, this dancing, this singing that they were observing? What is this all about? Cro-Magnons could not necessarily understand what was going on. They tried to figure out what was going on, but it was very alien to them.
Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal did not interbreed peacefully, in my opinion. Basically, it was Cro-Magnon raping Neanderthal woman. That's how we arose. And that's why it says in the Old Testament, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, these were the mighty men of old. Their offspring were the mighty men of old. Like sons of God, Cro-Magnon, male. Daughters of men, female, Neanderthal. It was Cro-Magnon raping Neanderthal woman, in my opinion, that produced us.
Our culture, our religious impulses, many of our institutions, societal institutions are really a combination of both Neanderthal institutions or religious aspects, if you want to call it that, and Cro-Magnons, that the Cro-Magnons really adopted or inherited or actually took over many Neanderthal concepts, many Neanderthal mental innovations, for instance, maybe symbolism, religious ceremonies, many of what in a most deep-seated way make up our culture, make up our identity as we see it today.
A lot of our culture and our beliefs and our disbeliefs come from Neanderthal. So we've incorporated much of the Neanderthal material into our lives. Now, in particular, picking on this in particular, I maintain that the story of Christ and the resurrection and all of it is simply a distorted version of the ancient moon religion. Crucified on the cross. The cross is the symbol for the moon in all pre-Christians cultures worldwide. He's crucified on a Friday, which is Friar's Day. She's the moon goddess. He's resurrected on Monday, which is Moon Day. He's resurrected 3 days later than he dies. Now 3 is important for several reasons in the moon culture. One, the moon has 3 colours, white, red and black. So the moon has 3 colours. And what's more important than that? Oh yeah, the other thing of course is that Earth, Moon and Sun are considered to be mother, father, child. You know, the Earth is the child, the daughter in fact, the daughter of the Sun and the Moon. That was part of the moon religion. So the 3 is important for several reasons. Christ is said to have been born on the 25th of December. Now that's 3 days, did you say 3? 3 days after the shortest day, when the sun is reborn every year after the moon sacrifices him on the shortest day. She sacrifices him and then resurrects him so that life can continue.
Neanderthal man. He first appeared about 150,000 years ago, in the Paleolithic era. He died out 100,000 years later. Why? We have no idea. a completely new race of humans come into being. Cro-Magnon man. He got his name from the place where he was found, Cro-Magnon in the Rhone Valley in southern France. A human being from the Ice Age. His accomplishments in a number of areas is remarkable. He knew a regulated social order. He discovered a tool we still use today, the needle. He used it to sew his animal skin clothing. We look at his cave paintings in France and Spain with amazement. And what struck me, these primitive men were capable of painting, interpreting what they saw realistically. What happened back then? We know that man was intelligent, that he had begun living in harmony with others. Scientists speak of the leap of intelligence, this turning point in the history of human development, but they can't explain it. There are other primitive paintings. In Australia, the rock paintings. Look at them. Is this the work of a primitive imagination? Or are they realistic interpretations of what they saw?
Here in the countryside of south-central England, in a hamlet named Avebury, stand 5,000-year-old stone structures of unknown origin. There are also circular mounds built for a purpose no one has deciphered. But now, an intriguing new theory suggests that these mysterious monuments are connected to similar formations on the surface of Mars.
The complex on Mars is exceedingly important in my view because it's highlighted by the presence of the famous face on Mars, which acted as a beacon and probably attracted our attention to the whole area.
David Percy is an author, filmmaker, and paranormal researcher. He believes that this face is not a trick of light and shadow, that is part of a vast complex of Martian structures created by intelligent life.
This is the whole of the complex. Over here to the west, we have an area which we call the city, and over here to the right is a crater, and beneath it, down here, a spiral mound, and over to the west, a pyramid which is five-sided.
In 1991, while researching the Avebury crop circle phenomenon, Percy made a startling connection.
I took an Ordnance Survey map of the area and superimposed it over the NASA photograph of the complex in its entirety and found that it matched.
The most striking match was made here at the famous Avebury Circle.
It's about a quarter of a mile in diameter, and around about 5,000 years ago they shifted approximately 4 million cubic feet of material. One would want to ask why. My hypothesis is that this is a copy of the crater on Mars.
That's a big stretch for a lot of people to believe that this is the duplicate of something on Mars.
Sure.
How do you get there?
Well, this isn't the only item that we're dealing with here. We have just a short distance away Silbury Hill. It's the same relative size as the spiral mound on Mars and is the same relative distance to the crater. It would have taken about 700 people 10 years to build this. It was equivalent in effort to putting a man on the moon in the 60s.
Avebury Circle and Silbury Hill do bear an uncanny resemblance to their counterparts on Mars. But I found some of Percy's other theories harder to accept.
David, I have to tell you that this, to me, looks like an ordinary country path.
Yes, I agree with you. It is in fact an ordinary country path, but it happens to be the analogue of the top ridge of the pyramids in the city on Mars.
But if you really want to see something, don't you think you'll see it? I mean, can't you be making things because you want it to fit your theory?
Yes, of course that can be done, and the people who look at this information have to see for themselves. You've got to explain, for instance, why that crater is positioned exactly where it is on this planet. It isn't at a random place. It is a very accurately measured point between the North Pole and the equator. If you draw a line from the wall down to the south to the spiral mound, and then up again to that tetrahedral rim pyramid, you get just under 19.5 degrees. If you do exactly the same thing at Avebury, you get precisely the same measurement. You cannot get such a correspondence just by wishful thinking.
How do you think it was created? Who do you think created it, and why?
Clearly, this complex on Mars that we're talking about was built by intelligent beings who went to Mars and built the complex because they were working on a project. And this project, in my view, concerned the emerging beings on this planet.
Percy believes that the extraterrestrials came to Avebury centuries ago to change the course of human evolution, that they conducted experiments in genetic engineering.
I believe they constructed the complex to undertake a genetic project that concerned the emerging beings on this planet. And I believe that that spot marks the birthplace of human beings, Cro-Magnon man.
Percy has found an unlikely ally for his bizarre theory in evolutionary researcher Stan Gooch. They have concentrated on the chain of human development, which made an unexpected and unexplained leap from Neanderthal man, who appears more ape-like, to Cro-Magnon man, who appears more human.
How do evolutionists explain that?
Well, they don't. They just drop the subject. They say, well, we'll find the home site of Cro-Magnon man one day, and it doesn't really matter. They just brush it aside.
What do you think of David's theory, that in fact it was genetic interference from extraterrestrials that explains this?
I think the extraterrestrial theory is more likely than any, because why have we not found the home sites where Cro-Magnon evolved over periods of millions of years? That's what's required.
Why would extraterrestrials on Mars be concerned with our development down here?
Because they have always been concerned with our development. I'm absolutely convinced we're related to other beings elsewhere in our galaxy, and indeed in other galaxies too.
You realize how fantastic all this sounds.
Yes.
Do you worry that people will think you're crazy?
No, because I believe we will actually be able to go to that site and see the things that they were doing. I predict that when we go there, we will find out a lot more that will corroborate this unfolding story.
NASA agrees that the Viking space probe has made significant scientific contributions. However, they steadfastly maintain that proof of life on Mars is not one of them.